Good afternoon, it is me again. This is going to be the second part of our chapter 10 video. So the first part was almost 30 minutes long, so I'm glad that I broke it into two parts so that you guys weren't having to watch an hour of me reading at one time. So this is gonna be the second part. We are picking up on page 197, Prisoner of Azkaban, book 3. Page 197, we're on chapter 10, the Marauder's Map. So Harry was just given the Marauder's Map as a gift from Fred and George Weasley. And it's a magic map where it doesn't show anything. It's just a blank piece of parchment, which is kind of like a man-made paper that they use at Hogwarts, until he taps it with his wand and says, "I solemnly swear I'm up to no good." And that makes the map appear. And then when he's done with it and he wants to hide what's on the map, he taps it again and says, "Mischief managed." So that's the deal with the map. Now, he used the map right away to get into Hogsmeade, into the basement of a store called Honeydukes, which is a candy shop in Hogsmeade. So that's where we're going to pick up. And we are on page 197, and Harry has just snuck in to Honeydukes. Honeydukes was so crowded with Hogwarts students that no one looked twice at Harry. He edged among them, looking around, and suppressed a laugh as he imagined the look that would spread over Dudley's piggy face if he could see where Harry was now. There were shelves upon shelves of the most succulent-looking sweets imaginable. Creamy chunks of nougat, shimmering pink squares of coconut ice, fat honey-colored toffees, hundreds of different kinds of chocolate in neat rows. There was a large barrel of every flavor beans, and another of fizzing Whizbees, the levitating sherbet balls that Ron had mentioned. Along yet another wall were special effects sweets, Drobble's Best Blowing Gum, which filled a room with bluebell-colored bubbles that refused to pop for days. The strange, splintery tooth-flossing string mints, tiny black pepper imps, breathe fire for your friends, ice mice, hear your teeth chatter and squeak, peppermint creams shaped like toads, hop realistically in the stomach, fragile sugar-spun quills, and exploding bonbons. Harry squeezed himself through a crowd of sixth-years and saw a sign hanging in the farthest corner of the shop. Unusual tastes. Ron and Hermione were standing underneath it, examining a tray of blood-flavored lollipops. Harry sneaked up behind them. "Ugh, no, Harry won't want one of those. They're for vampires, I expect," Hermione was saying. "How about these?" said Ron, shoving a jar of cockroach clusters under Hermione's nose. "Definitely not," said Harry. Ron nearly dropped the jar. "Harry," squealed Hermione, "what are you doing here? How did you—" "Wow," said Ron, looking very impressed. "You've learned to apparate." "Of course I haven't," said Harry. He dropped his voice so that none of the sixth-years could hear him, and told them all about the Marauder's Map. "How come Fred and George never gave it to me?" said Ron, outraged. "I'm their brother." "But Harry isn't going to keep it," said Hermione, as though the idea were ludicrous. "He's going to hand it in to Professor McGonagall, aren't you, Harry?" "No, I'm not," said Harry. "Are you mad?" said Ron, goggling at Hermione. "Hand in something that good?" "If I hand it in, I'll have to say where I got it. Filch would know Fred and George had nicked it." "But what about Sirius Black?" Hermione hissed. "He could be using one of the passages on that map to get into the castle. The teachers have got to know." "He can't be getting in through a passage," said Harry quickly. "There are 7 secret tunnels on the map, right? Fred and George reckon Filch already knows about 4 of them. And the other 3, one of them's caved in, so no one can get through it. One of them's got the Whomping Willow planted over the entrance, so you can't get out of it. And the one I just came through, Well, it's really hard to see the entrance to it down in the cellar, so unless he knew it was there, Harry hesitated. What if Black did know the passage was there? Ron, however, cleared his throat significantly and pointed to a notice pasted on the inside of the sweet shop door. By order of the Ministry of Magic, customers are reminded that until further notice, Dementors will be patrolling the streets of Hogsmeade every night after sundown. This measure has been put in place for the safety of Hogsmeade residents and will be lifted upon the recapture of Sirius Black. It is therefore advisable that you complete your shopping well before nightfall. Merry Christmas! See, said Ron quietly, I'd like to see Black try and break into Honeydukes with Dementors swarming all over the village. Anyway, Hermione, the Honeydukes owners would hear a break-in, wouldn't they? They live over the shop. Yes, but Hermione seemed to be struggling to find another problem. Look, Harry still shouldn't be coming into Hogsmeade. He hasn't got a signed form. If anyone finds out, he'll be in so much trouble. And it's not nightfall yet. What if Sirius Black turns up today? Now? He'd have a job spotting Harry in this, said Ron, nodding through the mullioned windows at the thick, swirling snow. Come on, Hermione, it's Christmas. Harry deserves a break. Hermione bit her lip, looking extremely worried. Are you going to report me? Harry asked her, grinning. Oh, of course not, but honestly, Harry. Seen the fizzing Whizbees, Harry, said Ron, grabbing him and leading him over to their barrel. And the jelly slugs? And the acid pops? Fred gave me one of those when I was 7. It burnt a hole right through my tongue. I remember Mom walloping him with her broomstick. Ron stared broodingly into the acid pop box. Reckon Fred'd take a bit of cockroach cluster if I told him they were peanuts. When Ron and Hermione had paid for all their sweets, the three of them left Honeydukes for the blizzard outside. Hogsmeade looked like a Christmas card. The little thatched cottages and shops were all covered in a layer of crisp snow. There were holly wreaths on the doors and strings of enchanted candles hanging in the trees. Harry shivered. Unlike the other two, he didn't have his cloak. They headed up the street, heads bowed against the wind, Ron and Hermione shouting through their scarves. That's the post office. Zonko's is up there. We could go up to the Shrieking Shack. Tell you what, said Ron, his teeth chattering. Shall we go for a butterbeer and the 3 broomsticks? Harry was more than willing. The wind was fierce and his hands were freezing. So they crossed the road and in a few minutes were entering the tiny inn. It was extremely crowded, noisy, warm, and smoky. A curvy sort of woman with a pretty face was serving a bunch of rowdy warlocks up at the bar. That's Madame Rosmerta, said Ron. I'll get the drinks, shall I? He added, going slightly red. Harry and Hermione made their way back to the back of the room, where there was a small vacant table between the window and a handsome Christmas tree, which stood next to the fireplace. Ron came back 5 minutes later carrying 3 foaming tankards of butterbeer. Merry Christmas, he said happily, raising his tankard. Harry drank deeply. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted and seemed to heat every bit of him from the inside. A sudden breeze ruffled his hair. The door of the 3 broomsticks had opened again. Harry looked over the rim of his tankard and choked. Professors McGonagall and Flitwick had just entered the pub with a flurry of snowflakes, shortly followed by Hagrid, who was deep in conversation with a portly man in a lime green bowler hat and a pinstriped cloak. Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic. In an instant, Ron and Hermione had both placed hands on the top of Harry's head and forced him off his stool and under the table. Dripping with butterbeer and crouching out of sight, Harry clutched his empty tankard and watched the teacher's and Fudge's feet move toward the bar. pause, then turn and walk right toward him. Somewhere above him, Hermione whispered, Mobiliarbus. The Christmas tree beside their table rose a few inches off the ground, drifted sideways, and landed with a soft thump right in front of their table, hiding them from view. Staring through the dense lower branches, Harry saw 4 sets of chair legs move back from the table right beside theirs. Then heard the grunts and sighs of the teacher and minister as they sat down. Next, he saw another pair of feet wearing sparkly turquoise high heels and heard a woman's voice. A small gillywater. Mine, said Professor McGonagall's voice. 4 pints of mulled mead. Ta, Rosmerta, said Hagrid. A cherry syrup and soda with ice and umbrella. Said Professor Flitwick, smacking his lips. So you'll be the red currant rum, Minister? Thank you, Rosmerta, my dear, said Fudge's voice. Lovely to see you again, I must say. Have one yourself, won't you? Come and join us. Well, thank you very much, Minister. Harry watched the glittering heels march away and back again. His heart was pounding uncomfortably in his throat. Why hadn't it occurred to him that this was the last weekend of term for the teachers, too? And how long were they going to sit there? He needed time to sneak back into Honeydukes if he wanted to return to the school tonight. Hermione's leg gave a nervous twitch next to him. So what brings you to this neck of the woods, Minister? Came Madame Rosmerta's voice. Harry saw the lower part of Fudge's thick body twist in his chair, as though he were checking for eavesdroppers. Then he said in a quiet voice, What else, my dear, but Sirius Black? I dare say you heard what happened up at the school at Halloween? I did hear a rumor, admitted Madame Rosmerta. Did you tell the whole pub, Hagrid? Said Professor McGonagall exasperatedly. Do you think Black's still in the area, Minister? Whispered Madame Rosmerta. I'm sure of it, said Fudge shortly. You know that if the Dementors have searched my pub twice, said Madame Rosmerta, a slight edge to her voice. Scared all my customers away. It's very bad for business, Minister. Rosmerta, my dear, I don't like them any more than you do, said Fudge uncomfortably. Necessary precaution. Unfortunate, but there you are. I've met some of them. They're in a fury against Dumbledore. He won't let them inside the castle grounds. I should think not, said Professor McGonagall sharply. How are we supposed to teach with those horrors floating around? Here, here, squeaked tiny Professor Flitwick, whose feet were dangling a foot from the ground. All the same, demurred Fudge, they are here to protect you all from something much worse. We all know what Black's capable of. Do you know, I still have trouble believing it, said Madame Rosmerta thoughtfully. Of all the people to go over to the dark side, Sirius Black was the last I'd have thought. I mean, I remember when he was a boy at Hogwarts. If you'd told me then what he was going to become, I'd have said, you'd had too much mead. You don't know the half of it, Rosmerta, said Fudge gruffly. The worst he did isn't widely known. The worst, said Madame Rosmerta, her voice alive with curiosity. Worse than murdering all those poor people, you mean? I certainly do, said Fudge. I can't believe that. What could possibly be worse? You say you remember him at Hogwarts, Rosmerta? Murmured Professor McGonagall. Do you remember who his best friend was? Naturally, said Madame Rosmerta with a small laugh. Never saw one without the other, did you? The number of times I had them in here. Oh, they used to make me laugh. Quite the double act, Sirius Black and James Potter. Harry dropped his tankard with a loud clunk. Ron kicked him. Precisely, said Professor McGonagall. Black and Potter, ringleaders of their little gang. Both very bright, of course, exceptionally bright, in fact. But I don't think I've ever had such a pair of troublemakers. I don't know, chuckled Hagrid. Fred and George Weasley could give them a run for their money. You'd have thought Black and Potter were brothers, chimed in Professor Flitwick. Inseparable. Of course they were, said Fudge. Potter trusted Black beyond all his other friends. Nothing changed when they left school. Black was best man when James married Lily. Then they named him godfather to Harry. Harry has no idea, of course. You can imagine how the idea would torment him. Because Black turned out to be in league with you-know-who, whispered Madame Rosmerta. Worse even than that, my dear. Fudge dropped his voice and proceeded in a sort of low rumble. Not many people are aware that the Potters knew you-know-who was after them. Dumbledore, who was of course working tirelessly against you-know-who, had a number of useful spies. One of them tipped him off, and he alerted James and Lily at once. He advised them to go into hiding. Well, of course, you-know-who wasn't an easy person to hide from. Dumbledore told them that their best chance was the Fidelius charm. How does that work? Said Madame Rosmerta, breathless with interest. Professor Flitwick cleared his throat. An immensely complex spell, he said squeakily, involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person or secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find unless, of course, the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you-know-who could search the village where James and Lily were staying for years and never find them, not even if he had his nose pressed against their sitting room window. So Black was the Potter's secret keeper, whispered Madame Rosmerta. Naturally, said Professor McGonagall. James Potter told Dumbledore that Black would die rather than tell where they were, that Black was planning to go into hiding himself. And yet, Dumbledore remained worried. I remember him offering to be the Potter's secret keeper himself. He suspected Black? Gasped Madame Rosmerta. He was sure that somebody close to the Potters had been keeping you-know-who informed of their movements, said Professor McGonagall darkly. Indeed, he had suspected for some time that someone on our side had turned traitor and was passing a lot of information to you-know-who. But James Potter insisted on using Black? He did, said Fudge heavily. And then, barely a week after the Fidelius charm had been performed, Black betrayed them, breathed Madame Rosmerta. He did indeed. Black was tired of his double agent role. He was ready to declare his support openly for you-know-who. And he seems to have planned this for the moment of the Potter's death. But as we all know, you-know-who met his downfall in little Harry Potter. Powers gone, horribly weakened, he fled. And this left Black in a very nasty position indeed. His master had fallen at the very moment when he, Black, had shown his true colors as a traitor. He had no choice but to run for it. Filthy stinking turncoat, Hagrid said, so loudly that half the bar went quiet. Shh, said Professor McGonagall. I met him, growled Hagrid. I must have been the last to see him before he killed all them people. It was me that rescued Harry from Lily and James's house after they were killed. Just got him out of the ruins, poor little thing. With a great slash across his forehead, and his parents dead, and Sirius Black turns up on that flying motorbike he used to ride. Never occurred to me what he was doing there. I didn't know he'd been Lily and James' secret keeper. Thought he'd just heard the news of you-know-who's attack and come to see what he could do. White and shaking he was. And you know what I did? I comforted the murdering traitor, Hagrid roared. Hagrid, please, said Professor McGonagall. Keep your voice down. How was I to know he wasn't upset about Lily and James? It was you-know-who he cared about. And then he says, give Harry to me, Hagrid. I'm his godfather. I'll look after him. Ha! But I had me orders from Dumbledore, and I told Black no. Dumbledore said Harry was to go to his aunt and uncle's. Black argued, but in the end he gave in, told me to take his motorbike to get Harry there. I won't need it anymore, he says. I should have known there was something fishy going on then. He loved that motorbike. What was he giving it to me for? Why wouldn't he need it anymore? Fact was, it was too easy to trace. Dumbledore knew he'd been the Potter's secret keeper. Black knew he was going to have to run for it that night. Knew it was a matter of hours before the Ministry was after him. But what if I'd given Harry to him, huh? I bet he'd have pitched him off the bike halfway out to sea. His best friend's son. But when a wizard goes over to the dark side, there's nothing and no one that matters to them anymore. A long silence followed Hagrid's story. Then Madame Rosmerta said with some satisfaction, "But he didn't manage to disappear, did he? The Ministry of Magic caught up with him the next day." "Alas, if only we had," said Fudge bitterly. "It was not we who found him. It was little Peter Pettigrew, another of the Potter's friends. Maddened by grief, no doubt, and knowing that Black had been the Potter's secret keeper, he went after Black himself." "Pettigrew? That fat little boy who was always tagging around after them at Hogwarts?" said Madame Rosmerta. "Hero worshipped Black and Potter," said Professor McGonagall. "Never quite in their league, talent-wise. I was often rather sharp with him. You can imagine how I regret that now." Sounded as though she had a sudden head cold. "There now, Minerva," said Fudge kindly. "Pettigrew died a hero's death. Eyewitnesses, Muggles, of course, we wiped their memories later, told us how Pettigrew cornered Black. They say he was sobbing. 'Lily and James, Sirius, how could you?' And then he went for his wand. Well, of course, Black was quicker. Blew Pettigrew to smithereens." Professor McGonagall blew her nose and sat thickly. "Stupid boy. Foolish boy. He was always hopeless at dueling. Should have left it to the Ministry." Professor McGonagall blew her nose and said thickly, I just read that part. Never mind. "I tell you, if I'd got to Black before little Pettigrew did, I wouldn't have messed around with wands. I'd have ripped him limb from limb," Hagrid growled. "You don't know what you're talking about, Hagrid," said Fudge sharply. "Nobody but trained hit wizards from the Magical Law Enforcement Squad would have stood a chance against Black once he was cornered. I was junior minister in the Department of Magical Catastrophes at the time, and I was one of the first on the scene after Black murdered all those people. I will never forget it. I still dream about it sometimes. A crater in the middle of the street, so deep it had cracked the sewer below. Bodies everywhere. Muggles screaming. Black standing there laughing. With what was left of Pettigrew in front of him. A heap of blood-stained robes and a few fragments." Fudge's voice stopped abruptly. There was the sound of 5 noses being blown. "Well, there you have it," Rosmerta said Fudge thickly. "Black was taken away by 20 members of the Magical Law Enforcement Squad, and Pettigrew received the Order of Merlin, first class, which I think was of some comfort to his poor mother. Black's been in Azkaban ever since." Madame Rosmerta let out a long sigh. "Is it true he's mad, Minister?" "I wish I could say that he was," said Fudge slowly. "I certainly believe his master's defeat unhinged him for a while. The murder of Pettigrew and all those Muggles was the action of a cornered and desperate man. Cruel, pointless. Yet I met Black on my last inspection of Azkaban. You know, most of the prisoners in there sit muttering to themselves in the dark. There's no sense in them. But I was shocked at how normal Black seemed. He spoke quite rationally to me. It was unnerving. You'd have thought he was merely bored. Asked if I'd finished with my newspaper, cool as you please. Said he missed doing the crossword. Yes, I was astounded at how little effect the Dementors seemed to be having on him. And he was one of the most heavily guarded in the place. You know, Dementors outside his door day and night. But what do you think he's broken out to do? Said Madame Rosmerta. Good gracious, minister, he isn't trying to rejoin you know who, is he? I dare say that is his eventual plan, said Fudge evasively, but we hope to catch Black long before that. I must say, you know who alone and friendless is one thing, but give him back his most devoted servant, and I shudder to think how quickly he'll rise again. There was a small clink of glass on wood. Someone had set down their glass. You know, Cornelius, if you're dining with the headmaster, we'd better head back up to the castle, said Professor McGonagall. One by one, the pairs of feet in front of Harry took the weight of their owners once more. Hems of cloaks swung into sight, and Madame Rosmerta's glittering heels disappeared behind the bar. The door of the Three Broomsticks opened again. There was another hurry of snow, and the teachers had disappeared. Harry, Ron, and Hermione's faces appeared under the table. They were both staring at him, lost for words. Oh my goodness, what a terrible and sad secret that we just found out. Black, Sirius Black, was not only James Potter, Harry's father's very closest friend, he was also named Harry Potter's godfather, which is a very important title. And he's the one who betrayed the location of the Potters, which ended up getting them killed by Voldemort. This is terrible news, and we will find out next time how Harry feels about it, because I can't imagine how devastated he must feel right now. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys Wednesday.